Conversation.
Hey, I'm speaking a human language for the first time in weeks. I mean, except for all the singing I would do.
Hello, and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell, now with the official Nintendo seal of quality.
And I'm Cameron Reigle.
I guess you don't have one yet, Cameron. I'm sorry.
No, I'm like one of those cartridges that gets around the copy protection.
Yeah, you're one of those Bible games for the NES. No, you're at least your artwork has the official Nintendo seal of approval. Your Donkey Kong Country 3 site banner that is officially approved by Nintendo, according to this document I have in the form of the Playing with Superpower book, just released by Prima Games, Prima, Tomato, and DK. Quite appropriately enough, I believe DK Publishing owns Prima and Nintendo. So this is a book that was released in accordance with the release of the SNES Classic or the Mini, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to be talking about the relevant portions of the book this evening, as well as some other things that interest us. And it's quite a big deal for DK Vine, considering we play a very small role in the book. So we'll be getting into all of that. This is going to be the first literary analysis episode of the Kongversation that's actually on a real piece of literature. Well, not literature so much, but a real book. It's not going to be just an episode where we make fun of a cheap Kindle erotica or a book that stole all of its jokes from web cartoonists. No, this is actually something that had effort and passion behind it, as well as the official Nintendo seal. So it's not going to be as funny as past literary analysis go, but hey, I'm kind of glad this isn't a piece of shit. So
I'm kind of getting that feeling of like a grade school kid who's forgotten to do his book report and it's due today, and I'm writing it as the teacher is coming around to collect it.
There's gonna be a little bit of that, yeah. So our hands are gonna start trembling. Did you ever have to read like book reports in front of the class? And it didn't bother me in elementary school, but in junior high, I started to become aware of how socially awkward I was at the time. And my hands would tremble whenever I'd have to read any paper in front of the class. And it was the most mortifying, embarrassing thing. And then people start laughing at you and your hands start trembling more. Oh, God. I wish I could really just do junior high all over again. I don't wish I could do it over again, but I wish I could go back with the confidence I've learned since becoming an adult and just kick its ass. Anyway.
I wish I could go back with the foreknowledge of how little that stuff mattered in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. And with that in mind, let's get to some due diligence. Check out DK Vine on Patreon, dkvine.com/Patreon. We are hard at work finally on getting the patron t-shirts designed and shipped soon. We've got a pretty funny design, I would think, that's sort of applicable to the episode at hand today in a roundabout way, and also kind of ties into our upcoming site redesign without spoiling too much, although those who are adept at reading between the tea leaves may know the direction we're going with that.
Coming when it's done.
We're not going to make any promises, but we are hard at work, and it does look gorgeous. I think I can say that. I can say this. Members of the DK Vine Inner Circle, which is the top tier of our Patreon, they have already seen previews of what the site redesign is going to look like. I think it's unanimous that people seem to love it. So I'm excited about it, and the new t-shirt that we'll get out to patrons at that same tier level will kind of tie into that a little bit, so it'll be fun. We're also going to offer custom neon avatars on the DK Vine forum for people at that tier as well. Just because we don't want too much visual cacophony on the forum. We want to keep them mostly DKU characters, but, you know, it's something people have been asking for the longest time, so custom neon avatars are on their way for the $25 tier and up. So speaking of the forum, never been a better time to join. Check it out at dkvine.com/forum. And you can always subscribe to DKVine on YouTube and follow us on social media at Facebook and Twitter. As far as the conversation goes, don't forget you can always give us a call at 1-202-630-VINE or 8463, and you can leave a message day or night, 24 hours a day, and we will eventually get to it. You know, we usually announce the topic of the conversation anywhere from 5 hours to upwards of 12 hours, usually ahead of time. On social media, we send out a message to the people who are going to be able to attend the live streams at $5 and up on Patreon, and, you know, let the forum know. And so if you have any thoughts on any topic we're going to do, stay plugged in there. Give us a call that day, and chances are your call will be taken on the conversation. Or you could just call us about anything, and we'll eventually play it on an Anything Goes call-sack episode. So again, the DK Vine hotline, that's 1-202-630-8463, or Vine. Subscribe to the conversation on iTunes, rate us on iTunes, or check us out on TuneIn, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Let your friends know about the show. If your friend is Fabio, tell Fabio to come on the conversation so we can oil down his luscious man-tits. Hashtag bring back the spiders. And finally, check out the Sea of Thieves Insider program. It's so much fun to play Sea of Thieves with people around the world, and especially it's fun to play with friends. I mean, you can play with total strangers and pick it up just fine, but I love the feeling of playing Sea of Thieves with just people from DK Vine, and, you know, I want to experience that with more and more DK Viners. So seaofthieves.com/insider. Sign up. Rare guarantees you will be able to get into the game before the game is released. So you'll be able to play the technical alpha for free if you sign up before Sea of Thieves launches in the first half of 2018. So it's a lot of fun. So please check it out. I wish we could talk more about it, but there's a pesky NDA as part of the technical alpha. We would be having so many conversations about Sea of Thieves if it wasn't for that NDA. All right. Well, let's talk about Playing with Superpower. Well, actually, I'm shortchanging the title of the book. The full title of the book is Playing with Superpower, Nintendo Super NES Classics, which I guess if you unabbreviate all that, it's Playing with Superpower, Nintendo Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classics, which just rolls off the tongue. So this is a book. It's actually a follow-up to Playing with Power, which was released last autumn when the original NES Classic came out that nobody was able to get their hands on unless they paid horrible, horrible prices from scalpers. And hopefully, I'm hoping I'll get my hands on a SNES Classic here, Cameron. I actually did go into the store ahead of time when it came out. Friday, September 29th. It's when this book came out and when the SNES Classic came out. And I went into the store. When they opened, they were already out. So, and I didn't feel like driving around. I had things to do that day. I didn't feel like driving around for several hours in the vain hope that I would find one. But it seems like a lot of DK Viners got lucky, and that's great for you. I never have any luck with this kind of stuff, with Nintendo's ridiculously shortchanged pieces of hardware. So
yeah, I'm trying to take their word for it. Like, they've put out statements like stressing, don't pay more than retail price for this system. We're going to have enough. I plan to get one eventually, but I've made things even harder for myself because I've decided I really want not the version of the Super Nintendo Classic Edition that's available in North America, but the one that's available in Europe and Australia. Because
you're a snob, is what you're saying.
No, I just want my brightly colored buttons.
Yeah, you're a button snob. You're one of those people who stick their pinky up in the air when playing a Super Nintendo and then die because you just took your hand off the controller. But you don't want your ugly purple colors. Well, you know what? I had some of the best times of my life on those ugly purple buttons. Thank you very much.
Oh, I don't even think they're that ugly. I just like the multicolored buttons.
They look like they look like
I don't understand the rationale behind it, but I don't find anything particularly wrong with the aesthetic.
Yeah, I was going to say they look like Pepto-Bismol, but I think they look more like that horrible candy, Good and Plenty, that I ranted about before on the Kongversation.
I'm actually just now realizing the North American Super Nintendo has the same color scheme as this Audacity waveform I'm looking at while we record.
Oh. Well, that's apropos then. That's a sign from Log that it was Kismet. It was meant to be. No, I'm, like I said on the Donkey Kong Land 3 Spotlight episode we did last episode, I am somebody who is very much a traditionalist. If it's meant for the region I'm living in, that's the version I'll take. Same reason I've never imported the Game Boy Color version of Donkey Kong Land. So even if it's worse off, like, say, our version of Donkey Konga, that's the version I'm just going to stick by because that's the version meant for me. I'm a weirdo.
Yeah, and my rationale is I have a fully functioning North American Super Nintendo, so I'd like to try something different.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's all yellow by now, right?
Oh no, mine's actually held up pretty well. I think I got like one of the my Super Nintendo was one of the like later waves. It came packaged with Super Mario All-Stars plus Super Mario World, and I think that was like toward the tail end, like 95 or 96.
Maybe because it's, as this book actually goes into, they actually go into the reason why so many Super Nintendos are discolored like that, and it was the chemical they used like on the system. So maybe they changed it by the later waves of Super Nintendo releases. I don't really know, but yeah, I remember mine is getting pretty yellow. I mean, it's in my parents' attic, shamefully, because there's no reason to really carry my Super Nintendo around with me. Having moved quite a bit over the last few years, and now that I'm settled with my wife, I may retrieve it along with all my old game consoles. I actually have an office now where I can, properly set all that up, but I still haven't like dug through the attic and retrieved all that stuff yet. But, yeah, so neither one of us have an SNES Classic, but we both have this book. So let's just talk a little bit about it. Now, obviously, this is a book that we can't really read, we can't just do a dramatic reading of all 319 pages of it, or 320 pages. So
nor should we try to, because this is a book best experienced looking at the beautiful setup they put together.
This is really a love letter to Super Nintendo nostalgia, and it's so nice to see because when the NES Classic was announced, I kind of rolled my eyes because Nintendo has always catered to the nostalgic fan base of the original Nintendo Entertainment System, as they should, because it was a groundbreaking system. Look, I had one. I played the hell out of it. It was the greatest thing in the world. But the problem is I didn't reach peak childhood until the Super Nintendo was out, and obviously Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong Country 2, Donkey Kong Country 3, games that changed my life for better or for worse, were on the Super Nintendo. So I am naturally more fond of this era. So when they announced the NES Classic, I was like, oh great, more original Nintendo nostalgia. When are we going to get our due? We're never going to get our due. And a year later, here we go, and we've got this great book to supplement that. And, people are upset in the Donkey Kong Country fan community that DKC 2 and DKC 3 aren't included. in the classic, or at least DKC2, you know. But whatever. I'm not letting it really get me down too much. It would be great, and it should be in there. And yeah, I know they're hackable. You can put them in, whatever. I'm still not going to do that because I'm a weirdo who, again, wants to take the product as intended for me. But I guess I'm such a conformist, right? I'm just a tool of the establishment, aren't I?
Seal of quality.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'm a fake paid actor day in and day out now.
Twice over now.
For both Microsoft and Nintendo. I have no credibility left. No, but, you know, yes, DKC2 should be in there. I agree. But I'm just glad that we have this wave of Super Nintendo nostalgia, and Donkey Kong Country is playing a prominent part in it. So
yeah, if you had this sort of hard choice to make, you can only include one game in the trilogy in this collection. And I mean, I can see like the tight number they had to work with. If that was all they were ever going to have, I'd be hard pressed to like cut another 2 games out of this collection and slot them in without just being like appealing solely to my personal bias, like not being able to put together a good argument.
And look,
but the first game is absolutely the game to put in here. It's, even if people may prefer the second and third like as games, this is the historical landmark. Yeah,
and it's the third best-selling Super Nintendo game of all time, the best-selling non-Mario game of all time, and yeah, like Donkey Kong Country 2 was what, the 5th? I mean,
that's actually in this book, I believe.
Yeah, it is. It's at the top of my head right now because of this book. And look, we're going to do an episode for the SNES Classic as soon as I get my hands on one. So we'll save all of that, you know, debate and hemming and hawing for that episode itself. This is about the book that complements the release of the mini system. So what this book basically does is it goes through the history of the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom, and it also goes through a detailed history on each and every game included in the SNES Classic, including Donkey Kong Country. And it's, if you're afraid, you know, is Donkey Kong Country going to get shortchanged? No, it does not. It gets quite a bit of hefty material in here, and it's all really tailored for the fans of Donkey Kong Country. You know, you kind of cringe whenever anybody outside of the fan community writes about Donkey Kong Country, or outside of, say, Rare or, you know, Retro, you know, I think can be grandfathered in now. But this is actually very, very well done, and I didn't have any complaints about the Donkey Kong Country section whatsoever.
Yeah, this, I mean, if you were to just tell me a book like this existed, like I didn't know DK Vine was reached out to, I didn't know it had the quality it did, this would strike me as the kind of thing that you could just completely phone in because it has Nintendo's name on it. It's associated with nostalgia. That's not at all what happened here. This is a really solid book. Yeah, in more ways than one. The hardcover is really solid.
Yeah, I've got both the hardcover and the paperback, and obviously they both have a prominent place on my shelf now. But the authors of the book, Sebastian Haley and Megan Marie, I think did a great job. And there is a small discrepancy, not in the Donkey Kong Country section, so it doesn't bother me that much. But we'll get into that, and we'll get into the amusing nature that it leaves us in as far as Donkey Kong fans who are concerned about the lore of Donkey Kong, because it basically just leaves us right back where we were before the book came out. So it is what it is. It's the nature of being a Donkey Kong fan. Okay, so you might be wondering, well, how did DK Vine become a part of a book that was officially endorsed by Nintendo? And it is officially endorsed by Nintendo. Not only does it have the official licensed product seal on it, what used to be called the seal of quality, which I always refer to now as Clapper, because I feel like Clapper is the true Nintendo seal of quality. But This also has a foreword in it by Reggie Fils-Aimé. So, I mean, it's legit.
There is no dancing around this. This has Nintendo, Super Nintendo branding on the cover. It has the Nintendo logo on the back. They promote this book on the official site for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classic Edition, as it says on the site.
Yeah. So you might be wondering, okay, so if this is an official Nintendo release put out by Prima, how the hell did DK Vine become a part of it? Because we've joked on this show that Nintendo wants nothing to do with us because let's be fair, we haven't exactly always seen eye to eye with the big N, and we have a certain ribald sense of humor.
I wouldn't call us very on brand.
No,
you know what I mean.
It's funny. Chad was talking about this on Twitter, and he was like, because there are screen grabs of the site in the 2-page spread that we're featured in, and he made a joke. Oh, it's good they went to the site at when that particular fake ad loaded, or else that could have jeopardized the whole thing. And because you look at our fake ads, and oh my god, I mean, we've got fake penis extension ads, we've got fake pornography ads, we've got one where Mario is giving the Heil Hitler salute.
It should be noted that the ad we were lucky they landed on was a baby in a toilet.
A baby in a toilet. And you know you're in a rough spot when you're hoping that the content they see on your site is the baby in the toilet. So, woo!
Specifically Kiddy Kong, so that's another...
Kong. Yeah.
We'll get into that.
We'll talk about that at the end of the show. I'll make them wait. But so there is some confusion about how we became a part of it. Basically, I was asked. I got an email. And they're like, hey, there's this top secret project. Would you answer some questions for it? And I didn't realize it was going to be for anything actually official for Nintendo. I thought it was going to be some sort of unofficial third-party like magazine release at best. You know, you occasionally see these retrospectives put out, usually by UK magazine newsstand companies.
Retro Gamer would be one of those.
Yeah. And I thought maybe it was just going to be a special commemorative issue to kind of tie into the Super Nintendo Classic. And I was like, okay, sure, you know. And I, you know, gave what amounts to an interview, even though, you know, it was all through text. And come to find out, it's for an official Nintendo release. And had I known that, I probably wouldn't have been so forthcoming with it. I probably would have doubted myself. It would have been like me being in front of my junior high school class, shaking with a piece of paper. So it's probably for the best I had no inclination what this was going to be for.
And once you found out, like, how long did you spend, like, just counting the days expecting for an email, like, saying, oh, hi, we just wanted to let you know Nintendo reviewed the book, you're no longer in it.
Every single day. Like, seriously, every time I checked my email, I would wince because I would be like, here it comes. Because, yeah, I just pictured somebody at Nintendo, you know, reviewing the proposed layout, you know, and seeing that and, like, taking the red Sharpie, doing an X over it. Like, no, we don't want to associate with these pieces of shit. So imagine, and even up to the point of release, like, eventually I got the go ahead. Hey, you can tell people about this, and this was like a week or two before the book came out, and I still didn't. Like, because I honestly believed, I got this email by mistake. I'm sure we were actually cut. So it wasn't until the book came out September 29th, after I gave up on my quest to get a Super Nintendo Classic, I went to the bookstore, picked it up off the shelf, and flipped through it, and it wasn't until I saw Danny DeVito and Bottles staring back at me that I thought, oh, okay, well, there we go.
I just enjoy that's a sentence you could say. Danny DeVito and Bottles.
So, and then I felt comfortable promoting it, because I could have, you know, broken, you know, the the silence on it before I actually did, but I honestly thought there's no way we're going to be in this. And I was like almost accepting of it. I was like, if we're in it, that's great, but I don't believe we're going to be in it. And yet we are. So this hopefully it points to a bright future for DK Vine and Nintendo. I'm sure Reggie's going to have us over for Thanksgiving, as I've already joked about, I believe, to the patrons. We're going to exchange Christmas gifts, absolutely. I'm probably his Secret Santa. Anyway, we'll get into the DK Vine section of it. I don't want to self-aggrandize too much. By the way, I should point out that even though we're a part of this book, we have no financial stake in this book. So we're talking about it just because it's a pretty cool book. We would probably talk about this even if we weren't in it, but
this also means we're free to slag it off if we want, but we're not.
Exactly. We have no stakes in this other than we're in this kind of thing that's going to be on bookstore shelves for a while, so people can discover DK Vine via our inclusion in this book. But if you're listening to this, you already know who we are, so we're not trying to sell you this book. But let's talk about the relevant bits of the book that have nothing to do with DKVine.com, and that's the Donkey Kong Country section within. And if you have the book and you haven't actually gone through this, you can follow along with us. Flip to page 186, class, and we will be talking about Donkey Kong Country today. So,
and we're only going to cover the bits relevant to us, so I'm sorry, your 5-hour Kirby Dream Course episode is going to have to come from another podcast.
Yeah, Matt throws his computer across the room as he listens to this. By the way, I am really excited to get a SNES Classic just to replay Kirby's Dream Course. Seriously, I love Kirby's Dream Course. I think it is underrated, and I hope more people discover it. I mean,
it's actually, and I'll just be 100% honest, I've seen people say, like, online, like, well, if they could have cut any game, it could have been Kirby's Dream Course, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I didn't get a chance to play Kirby's Dream Course, and I would like the chance to play it when I get my hands on this thing.
It's probably my favorite Kirby game, and granted, I mean, you get tired of it after a while. It's not something that really, you're craving to play, but I did have fun with it when I was a kid, and I would just play it when I had time to play more games that weren't just based around Donkey Kong or Rare or Playtonic. I would pick it up every now and then, and it was a fun take on golf, and mini golf in particular. Anyway, Donkey Kong Country. So it starts, and I love that it starts with a full transcription of A Dark and Stormy Night from the instruction manual, written by Dan Olson, right? I believe.
Not Lee Loveday.
Not Lee Loveday. No, Lee Loveday would write the later stories in the series, but this was typed out by NOA's Dan Olson, who actually gets a shout out in the acknowledgments of the book. So
I also want to call attention to something else on this page. Immediately to the right of the beginning of the Dark and Stormy Night reprint, it lists the developer, the publisher, and the release date, and it does this for every game in the collection, yes, along with a scan of the box art. And, developer Rare, publisher Nintendo, release date November 21st, 1994. And, they do consistently call them Rare throughout the entire book.
Not Rareware. So, no, this is great. They don't shy away from talking about Rare, and they don't shy away from talking about particular things from the legacy of Donkey Kong Country that you wouldn't think would be an official Nintendo book. So
this even, they bring up Rare in, like, the Star Fox section where it's relevant.
Yeah. I mean, old quotes from Greg Mails are in there, so it's great. I mean, if you're worrying they were going to whitewash history and try to downplay Rare and the significance of Rare, no, Rare is very much part of almost every relevant page in this section. So that was great to see. And so flipping the page, and it's goes into the development of Donkey Kong Country, how the game came to be. And so it goes into a bit of the backstory here. And, you know, this is something we know, but it's worth repeating because it's an interesting story, and I honestly didn't know some aspects of this. So Tony Harmon of Nintendo of America, and he was the product acquisitions and development manager. So he was being sent around the world looking for something that Nintendo could invest money into with developers or new gaming technology. And so he stopped off at Rare in Twycross, and this was, you know, before they were in their sprawling estate that they are now. This is when they were in Manor House, not Manor Park, Manor House. And, you know, they actually were making games out of, you know, barns, you know.
Literal barns.
Literal
not
barns,
figurative barns.
Yeah, now, you know, the current Rare campus, you know, they call it Manor Park as a nod to the Manor House, and they call the buildings where they, you know, do all of this work, you know, where they develop games, and also the community team is located in. They call those the barns. They're not barns, but that's just based off of the tradition of where they were located during this time in their history. And so Tony Harmon went to Rare, and the Stampers showed him off the Silicon Graphics workstation, and they saw a CGI boxer being run on the Super Nintendo hardware, and, you know, blew Harmon's mind. So then he went to then president of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, and I think that's the first time I've actually correctly pronounced his name on the show. So Yamauchi, and I could be wrong, I could be botching it, and people are going to call me out on it. But Yamauchi,
I'm just glad you're not, like, slipping and saying Mamechi.
Mamechi, yeah. Oh, could you imagine? I'm sure there's some sort of timeline out there where Mamechi is the president of Nintendo currently, and they've already gone out of business due to the 300 Rhythm Heaven releases that he authorized in 1 year. So Yamauchi was hesitant about investing any money in Rare because Nintendo really went to bed, if you'll pardon the term, with Western developers during these days. And those days, these days, any days, they rarely worked with Western developers for first-party projects of any significant caliber. So Harmon, like, was just absolutely convinced that the Silicon Graphics workstations and ACM were a boon that Nintendo had to get behind. And so the way I didn't know this, the way he convinced Yamauchi to invest in Rare doing a project for them was taking the budget for one of Nintendo's commercials and instead putting it towards Rare. And so they would lose one TV commercial for something, and Yamauchi reluctantly agreed to do it. He was like, okay, you know.
Yeah, this was completely news to me as well, and it, like, kind of puts in perspective how much of a commercial cost back then.
Yeah, I believe it was quoted in the book. It said the budgets averaged in the low millions for one single TV spot for Nintendo, which, what the hell? I mean, not just for production, obviously, for then, you know, paying networks around the world to air your commercials.
So would say the Donkey Kong Country 3 gorilla on a motorcycle have cost as much as a game?
Yeah, that's some high-priced misogyny right there. Oh, God. So, yeah, but I'm kind of curious now what game's commercial would have, like, inevitably got the axe. I'm sure there's no, like, direct correlation, but let's say history was changed and Yamauchi said, no, we need this money for commercial. What game would have gotten that commercial, and what game didn't get a commercial from that era that then instead went towards financing Donkey Kong Country? Like, I guess this would have been 1993, maybe
It could have
a
even
little bit
just
earlier.
been a catch-all like Super Nintendo commercial ad campaign.
True. Yeah. Or a Game Boy commercial or something of that sort. So, yeah, I didn't know that. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool and kind of frightening that a commercial can cost as much as the initial development investment for Donkey Kong Country. So, anyway, Yamauchi eventually came on board when he saw in-work progress for Donkey Kong Country. And he said he thought it would be an amazing addition for the upcoming Nintendo 64 library. And then he found out it was for the Super Nintendo. And that was what kind of shook him up, got him on board with Rare, got him on board with Donkey Kong Country. And from then on, Donkey Kong Country became Nintendo's priority number one of that time period. And it became the focus of the Consumer Electronics shows in 1994. The winter one was quoted here, the Winter CES show. These were the precursors to E3, by the way. But I distinctly remember that it was also a big deal at the summer one as well. So I guess, they held maybe 2 a year, and this was before E3 became an annual event starting in 95. So I guess...
I believe you can find footage of at least one of the events Donkey Kong Country was at, featuring the CGI head of Donkey Kong hitting on everybody.
Yeah, and then there was another one where he was... the very sexual one where they recreated Donkey Kong's treehouse. Like, they built a model Donkey Kong's treehouse, and then you could see a silhouette of him through the window. It looked like he was humping something, and the treehouse started violently shaking.
Yeah, it was... They tried to do a thing where, like, look at the treehouse is shaking, Donkey Kong's going nuts inside, but then they had a silhouette of him just sitting by the window also built into it.
Yeah, so it looked like he was having relations with either Candy Kong or himself. So... it's funny. Look it up on YouTube. It's some CES show from 94, but a little bit unfortunate. But obviously, DK Vine loves it quite a bit. We've produced far more shocking content in the name of Donkey Kong since then. So who are we to be so demure? So they also go over a bit on the history of advanced computer modeling, or ACM. And, you've got the classic wireframe image of Diddy with the wireframe body, but his head fully, textured.
And they mentioned that they were working in Power Animator, which I brought up on the Deal of the Art episode, which I'm glad, because this confirms I wasn't talking completely out of my ass.
It's always nice when you realize you weren't lying to the audience, yeah. And they also, go over kind of, the history of... motion pictures of that era, Jurassic Park obviously, comes up, and how Donkey Kong Country was a year before Toy Story, which is still kind of mind-blowing. And quite honestly, yeah, Toy Story was an impressive feat, but in my opinion, looking at them side by side, Donkey Kong Country holds up visually better than the original Toy Story, just a bit. And different mediums, yeah, obviously, yeah, so I'm just... having a pissing fight for no reason, but that, I don't know. I feel like...
certainly the fact that it's interactive makes it impressive just in and of itself.
Right. So, then on the next page, 189, we'll talk about the renders in this whole section when we get to the characters, but I'll ignore the render of Donkey Kong. The era inappropriate render of Donkey Kong on page 188.
The toothy grin Donkey Kong, that'll give you enough of a clue which decade this is.
And we'll get into some robust discussion about that when we get to the character section in the book. So page 189 then, this blew me away. There's a page on the Donkey Kong Country exposed VHS tape. What? This is... If you're wondering how much this book is a labor of love for each and every game, and specifically of people who grew up during the era that these games came out in, this page should win you over. Because obviously the Donkey Kong Country exposed VHS tape is beloved and cherished by DK Vine. Josh Wolf in full-on 90s Seattle grunge attire walking through Nintendo of America, interviewing different people. That's obviously, of course, the source of much memery from DK Vine. And even future head of Retro, Michael Kelbau, made a cameo in that thing.
This same section about DKC Exposed also makes mention of the Nintendo Treehouse and how that still exists today, and it was specifically created around Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah. People may not know, especially younger gamers may not know, but yeah, the Treehouse that you see, every E3, they have the Treehouse Live. That Treehouse they're referring to is Donkey Kong's Treehouse. So that's always, E3s where we wouldn't get any news whatsoever, just those horrendous drought E3s, which we haven't had in a while. But we would always kind of try to comfort ourselves. Well, at least the Treehouse made an appearance. So, yeah, I like that the model of the Treehouse still at least is visually close to the way it appeared in the original Donkey Kong Country game.
Yeah,
despite the fact that Donkey Kong has moved in game since then. That original rare style treehouse.
This is specifically like the lookout tower style treehouse, not the one he's moved on to in DKC Returns.
Well, the lookout tower is Donkey Kong 64. The watchtower, this is just the regular treehouse from Donkey Kong Country, right?
In the style of style of,
yeah, okay, yeah.
But yeah, it's the original DKC treehouse. There's no mistaking it.
Yeah. So let's flip the page and go to this section called More Than Just a Pretty Ape. And I love this page because obviously Donkey Kong Country, people know it as, it was a game that had revolutionary graphics for the day. And people have tried to write it off as a result. It's all visual spark and no substance. Of course, the infamous Miyamoto quote that we brought up 2 episodes ago.
The apocryphal quote.
Possibly apocryphal. There's still debate, but we lean towards apocryphal. If we can ever find the actual supposed magazine that it appeared in, we'll obviously cop to it. But we also provided possible explanations if he did give the quote, what was the reasoning behind it. But, that still kind of hangs over Donkey Kong Country fans' heads.
See our previous episode.
Yeah.
Well, 2 episodes ago.
2 episodes ago, right. So, see the previous episode if you're a fan of Donkey Kong Land 3, and I know you are. So, what this page does was actually go into the design of Donkey Kong Country. And Greg Mayles is quoted, he was the head of design for the game. And I like that it talks about the flow of the game and the exploration, because the flow is that very fluid gameplay where you can almost get into a rhythm with each stage. If you know what you're doing, you can just zoom through it. But you can also take your time and explore as well. And that's kind of the heart of Donkey Kong Country gameplay when it's done right. And they go into all of that, and they talk about, instead of having hit points, they had the tag team system. And they don't really talk about it, but, that speaks towards, again, Greg Mayles' design philosophies, where he doesn't like on-screen clutter, and he wants everything to be conveyed in universe if he can. Obviously, there are concessions that are made from time to time, from Donkey Kong Country to Sea of Thieves. But for the most part, he tries to really have everything make sense from an in-universe standpoint, first and foremost, and to kind of immerse you, the gamer, in that world without making you feel like you're playing a game. And that was I remember reading in the instruction manual, it specifically pointed out, it made light of the fact that there was no speedometer in the game. And I never had considered in other games that, you had all this visual noise. I remember Super Mario Bros. 3 was really bad. It had just so much junk on the bottom of the screen.
It has like a dedicated bar at the bottom.
As
does a game like Kirby Superstar, and I'm not talking down Kirby Superstar, God no.
And I'm not talking now.
But
Super
it's
Mario
just
Brothers
this is an
3.
observable difference in how Donkey Kong Country chose to do its own thing.
Yeah, as a young gamer, when I read that, it kind of spoke to me and spoke to something I never considered before, and I remember loving that quote. And I was a little disciple of Donkey Kong Country then, and I didn't know who he was at the time, but of Greg Mail's design philosophies. I was like, yeah, that makes awesome sense. Why don't more games do this? And I still think to this day, why don't more games do this? I just slagged off Super Mario Brothers 3, though, but it does reference Super Mario Brothers 3 in the opening paragraph. It says, Rare also managed to create a truly refreshing platformer. Looking to Super Mario Brothers 3 as the pinnacle of 2D platformers, Rare aimed for the same structure while emphasizing flow. And it's funny that they point out Super Mario Brothers 3, because I've always pointed towards Super Mario World as the true bedrock of the DKC inspiration, but maybe I'm wrong there.
I mean, you would think that just by virtue of the fact that both games have some form of animal to ride on.
Yeah. But again, just because I'm not a fan of Super Mario Brothers 3 doesn't mean the game doesn't have merit. It's not that I'm not a fan of it. It's just my least favorite Mario platformer. Well, the original Super Mario Brothers would be, but I think I do hold that up because it was just such a mind-blowing experience when it came out.
Your least favorite original series Mario game is kind of like praising with faint damnation. It's
I don't
it's meaningless.
The only things I really don't like about Super Mario Brothers 3 are the aesthetics, and I feel like the aesthetics just hold the game back. I feel like Super Mario World it's a world I would much rather visit. I don't want to visit the world of Super Mario Brothers 3. I find it depressing and draining for some weird reason. Where I love the world of Super Mario Brothers 2, Doki Doki Panic. I think that's just such an amazing fictional environment. Same with Super Mario World, and of course, the same with Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country is the first world I wouldn't mind living in. So, anyway, the next page, soundtrack. I'm glad that DKC gets, it's due with the soundtrack. I mean, a lot of games in this book, they talk about the soundtrack, but it gets its proper due here, especially how groundbreaking the soundtrack for Donkey Kong Country was and how important it was for the game's reputation. And David Wise, they have some information about David Wise here, which some I knew, some I didn't. I didn't know that Dave Wise expected someone from Nintendo of Japan to score the game, because he created the 3 demo tracks that we know eventually became the full-on DK Island Swing melody or medley. But I didn't realize that Wise had no idea or inclination that he was actually up for the job to begin with. And when he got that gig, that secured him a full-time job at Rare, because he was, up until that point, he had just been freelancing it there since the 1980s. So I didn't know that. There is...
I'm floored about how much there is in this book that I did not know, just because you would think, being entrenched in this sort of trivial minutia for so long, there'd be nothing new I could be taught, but this book is putting me in my place.
Yeah. There is a slight omission because they don't mention Eveline Fisher or Robin Beanland's one contribution, but I'm willing to overlook. I mean, they're still in the credits section at the very end, so it's not like it's a complete shutout for them. But anyway, let's go on to the characters. This is a 2-page spread from 192 to 193. And we can mine a lot of discussion from this, Cameron. So,
do you want to start with the good or start with the not as good?
Let's start with the not as good, because I want to end on the positive. So, Cameron, this is your area of expertise, so I will let you take the lead.
Okay. So throughout this book, if you I'll say this up front. If you really like just having a print archive of a lot of like vintage art from this era of Nintendo, this is a pretty great book to purchase. You get like a lot of like high quality assets and art from these old games. And but Donkey Kong Country's section of this book is kind of the one area where this didn't hold up quite as well. This character, other sections of the book do sometimes dip into like art and screenshots from games that aren't the game mentioned in the book. Like, say, the Star Fox section has like a render of Crystal in the back for when they're talking about Star Fox Command or Star Fox Adventures. But when they're talking about the actual game in the book, the content early on, they keep it consistently from that game. This kind of drops within this section of Donkey Kong Country, as well as a few pages earlier with the Toothy Grin render.
Right.
The characters on this page, like, I can just say right off the bat where I think they're from. Donkey Kong's render looks to be from like either... It's one of those general renders, I think, like around the time of Mario Party 9, maybe. Diddy Kong is from DK Jungle Climber. Cranky is from Tropical Freeze. Funky is from Tropical Freeze. And Candy is from DKC 1.
Yes. And then the Animal Buddies are also a grab bag of varied sources, although they're a little bit better than the Kongs.
Yeah, Rambi from Returns, Ungard from the original DKC, Espresso from the original DKC, Winky from the original DKC, and Squawks from Returns, but I noticed a weird thing in this, and I'm not sure where they might have found this or if they actively edited this themselves, but Squawks, his Returns render, I don't know if... Do you remember what that looked like, Hyle? He had like these like creepy white talons. And they've made them yellow for this book. Or rather, the image they pulled at least has yellow talons.
Interesting. They just color corrected it in Photoshop?
Yeah, I don't know, but it's a curious choice. And I don't think any of the other games in this book have this sort of weird disconnect. The closest thing I can think of is I think the Link to the Past section has a lot of artwork from the GBA remake, which was like illustrated in a similar style but cleaned up a little bit for the modern era.
Yeah. I just looked it up. Yeah, you're right. Squawks has the white talons in DKCR, and that's clearly where this render came from. But I've never seen it with yellow, and I think in Tropical Freeze they make his talons yellow again.
Yeah, and I know that because the render from Tropical Freeze is also in this book.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Yeah, so there could be a couple different reasons why they went down this route, and I think the theory I have is that nobody but Rare has these renders in any significant high-quality format anymore. You look at the renders for the original Donkey Kong Country, and there are some that are in okay quality, and I think the ones that are in okay quality they use Candy, Espresso, Winky, and Guard, but some are just so low resolution you wouldn't want to use them. Some are weirdly tinted with like this almost purple light that it's just, I don't know. I could see why they went this route, but it's a shame that nobody from Nintendo then may have most of the renders in extremely high resolution from this vintage 1994 era of Donkey Kong Country. You know, hey, it's a small blemish on an otherwise amazing section in the book, so I'm not really going to hold it against it, but
I've been trying to like figure out if like any of the old artwork they do have in here was pulled from DK Vine, because we're one of the only archives for it, that kind of stuff on the internet.
Yeah, they could have pulled it from various sources. I mean, a lot of these renders are shared through the same place. I don't know who originally had them. You know, we've scoured, corners of the internet and old, magazine scans and whatnot to get the ones in our gallery. And they don't use any of the clearly scanned ones. Like these are all of
yeah,
actual decent quality.
There's no telltale signs of them grabbing them from us, which is why I haven't definitively found one that I think was.
But there'd be no way of telling for sure if they did. It's not like the in-game models that we grab that have the image, by DK Vine little tag on it that you see crop up on various fan wikis from time to time. But hey, whatever. So the actual text in the character section is very interesting, and let's talk about that a little bit. So I'm not going to read all these verbatim, but I need to read a couple verbatim. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to read to you the little blurb for Donkey Kong, okay? So it says, as the marketing noted, this isn't your father's Donkey Kong. He is, in fact, Donkey Kong Jr. all grown up. For his 16-bit revival, Donkey Kong was redesigned, with his original creator Shigeru Miyamoto providing Rare with a sketch that included the now iconic red tie. Mr. Miyamoto also suggested Donkey's ape-inspired hand slap move, which allowed him to defeat nearby enemies and reveal certain secrets. Rare was able to implement the move just weeks before the deadline for the game, which is why it was so underutilized in the actual game. Between that and the blowing mechanic, yeah. Thanks, Miyamoto. So obviously the big holy shit, I can't believe they went there opening salvo, swoopy salvo in this blurb is they say the modern Donkey Kong is Donkey Kong Jr. all grown up, which is DK Vine's stance on the matter. We can get into what that means as far as who Cranky Kong is. I believe the stance we have that's shared by the staffers at the moment, at least this is my opinion, is that Cranky Kong is Donkey Kong's biological grandfather. Wrinkly Kong is his biological grandmother. And there is a missing generation, either a daughter or son that went missing or gave up Donkey Kong. And then Cranky and Wrinkly raised Donkey Kong as if he were their own son. And he is Donkey Kong Jr. as a result. That's my stance. I think that takes all of the disparate statements over the years from Rare and Nintendo and makes them all work within. Because look, in some games, Cranky's referred to as his grandfather, but then he says, "I raised you." So that makes sense to me. But here, you don't really see the statement in writing. Even back during this era, you never saw it that the modern Donkey Kong was Donkey Kong Jr.
Yeah, and this was weird because you would see it stated plain as day that Cranky was the original Donkey Kong. There was no bones about that.
Yeah, so because of that, that's a less controversial statement that Cranky is the original Donkey Kong. He's Donkey Kong Sr. Because that's the whole point of the character in Rare's games. So you really can't get away from it. I see some people who aren't that fond of Rare's take of Donkey Kong try to walk it back nowadays and say, well, Rare's gone, so that's no longer canon. But look, you can't just explain it away. It's in these games that are Donkey Kong canon. I mean, for the better part of a decade, that was explicitly referenced in every appearance Cranky made.
It's not really something like saying the Koopa Kids aren't Bowser's biological children, where the game is largely unaffected by that context.
Yeah, the whole point of Cranky bitches at you many, many times throughout the trilogy that, about him being the original Donkey Kong. So there's really no shying away from it. But the whole modern Donkey Kong is DK Jr. thing, that's something DK Vine has been a proponent of since our conception, but you don't really see that anywhere else. And there is a alternate viewpoint that's peddled by, I think, everybody else, at least as far as fans go. Nintendo's really never commented on it, but as far as fans go, that the modern Donkey Kong is the son of Donkey Kong Jr. Like, that doesn't work for me, obviously, but that's, I think, the majority opinion outside of DK Vine.
I think I prefer the missing generation idea just because if you make it that DK Jr. is the missing generation, the question then becomes, what the heck happened to DK Jr.?
Right. Why is DK Jr. a deadbeat father? And it's kind of too dark. It's better that it's an unseen...
Or that he
character.
died off screen.
Right. No matter... There's no getting around it. There's going to be some dark implications there for DK Jr. And for me, the whole generational aspect of Donkey Kong Country and the fact that Donkey Kong starts the game considered a video game hero, which is kind of important for Diddy Kong's whole character arc, it just makes too much sense. Plus, DKC 2, there were so many allusions to DK Jr. because Donkey Kong was kidnapped, and the whole irony there is he was DK Jr. He was the protagonist of DK Jr. And now he's kidnapped, and his protege has to rescue him. You lose all of that if you say the modern Donkey Kong is an previously unseen generation, the son of DK Jr.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't really add up as far as the aging of the Kongs go. Either a real-time capacity or in some sort of fluid comic book time.
And it's nice to see, like, in this book, some affirmation of that. Let's take a look at where they immediately undermine it.
Yeah, okay. Well, they actually undermine it before Donkey Kong Country, because these games, correct me if I'm wrong, they're listed in chronological order in the book, right?
I think all of them except for Star Fox 2, which is just to put it right next to Star Fox.
Right. They should put that at the end, because the official release date of Star Fox 2 is September 29th, 2017. I don't want to hear otherwise, but... I can see why they put them right next to each other. So in the Super Mario Kart section of the book, there is a passage called, and this is in their 16 bits section, where they give 16 factoids about each game. So this is number 11 in the Super Mario Kart entry, and it's called the DK Lineage. Super Mario Kart is the only Mario Kart game to feature Donkey Kong Jr. Due to the success of Donkey Kong Country, all future Mario Kart entries feature Donkey Kong, who is actually Donkey Kong Jr.'s son, with Cranky Kong, aka Donkey Kong Sr., canonically being the character featured in the original Donkey Kong game. Makes sense, right? Well...
Not really, book.
Because you say on page 192... No, so here's what we think happened. By the way, there was a robust argument on the DK Vine forum about this, because somebody, and I forget who, forgive me, I'm not going to look it up right now, because if I pull up dkvine.com in its current site skin while I'm live streaming, the live stream will inevitably crash because it cannot handle the intense animation.
Our site is much less streamlined than a Super Nintendo game.
Somebody posted on the DK Vine forum, because they obviously saw this entry first, which, why would you not read the Donkey Kong Country entry first? I don't know. But they saw this, and they ran with it on the DK Vine forum. They said, aha, proof in an official Nintendo game that DK Vine is featured in, so you cannot ignore this, that the current modern Donkey Kong is the son of Donkey Kong Jr. and not Donkey Kong Jr. Then I believe it was I Am Given came forward and said, actually, on page 192. And then I helpfully provided the screenshot. So yeah, Cameron, here's what I think happened, and I know you feel the same way. This book had 2 authors, so clearly they divided up the workload. I don't know if it was Sebastian Haley or Megan Marie that did the DKC section, or vice versa for the Super Mario Kart section, but it was clear that for the Super Mario Kart section, they researched and referenced a lot of Mario-heavy resources. And for the Donkey Kong Country section, they researched and referenced a lot of Donkey Kong Country-heavy resources, like, maybe DK Vine, maybe some other sites, DKC Atlas, so they got conflicting information, because if you're a Mario diehard, you may feel one way. If you're a Donkey Kong Country diehard, you probably feel another way. Not to say that Mario fans can't believe that the current Donkey Kong is Donkey Kong Jr. or Donkey Kong Country fans
Mario
can't believe that it's the son.
fans have to more actively reconcile that Donkey Kong Jr. and baby Donkey Kong exist in their games.
Yeah. We can, for the most part, ignore like Donkey Kong Jr. and Super Mario Kart. Like, the only time we can't ignore Junior is in Mario Tennis for the N64, and then we fan-wank that away, of course, with the Chest of Time.
Because Baby Mario is also in that game.
Yes, of course. So this is kind of just hilarious to me that we have this official Nintendo book that DK Vine's a part of, and although, to be fair, we did not officially in any capacity contribute anything to the actual game sections. Like, they didn't hit us up on an official capacity for, hey, what do you think about Squawks? Can you tell us something about Squawk? Nothing like that. So we didn't have anything to do with the Donkey Kong Country section in the book. But, we have this official Nintendo book that we do have our finger in the pie of, and it gives conflicting information that in one way we can use it to bolster our argument, and another way it completely torpedoes our argument. And when I said it pretty much puts the fan base exactly back where it was before the book came out, this is what I was referring to, which I love, because it gives everybody wins. Your own personal canons can now be validated depending on what you want to reference. So I honestly, I hope Nintendo never clarifies this, because somebody is going to lose if they clarify it.
I should mention, somebody on the DK Vine forum did reach out to the publisher, or a representative thereof, on social media, and I think they tried to explain that the mention in the Donkey Kong section was being metaphorical about it being DK Jr. all grown up, but I don't think that was the words of the original authors, and it just kind of seems like a quick paving over to placate somebody who brought up the mistake.
Absolutely.
Because you don't say "in fact" when you're talking about a metaphor.
No. You're literally using a term that means literally. Let's go to the live stream real quick and see what they're saying. Captain Cheesebag agrees with us. He says, DK Jr., and he says probably several authors. Really, the 2 listed probably were just chief editors. Maybe that's the case. I'm not really sure. But either way, there were at least 2 people compiling this book and doing different sections. And when you get into something as complicated as Donkey Kong lore, then obviously you're going to have discrepancies. G-Man Sir in the live stream says, but then who is Pink DK Jr. from Donkey Kong Jr. Math? And that's obviously Swanky Kong. Come on. That's young Swanky Kong, looking very swanky in his toddler form. At least that's how I've always fan-wanked, because I don't really beat this bongo as much as I used to, but I still like to fanwank that Swanky is DK's brother.
I've also noticed that's like not a bit of fanon that gets challenged too often. Like,
No, because what else are you gonna say? Like, well, it could be Funky Kong, I guess, but
Funky was never that uncool looking. You can't ruin Funky Kong for me like that with your like Star Wars prequel interpretation of Funky.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Funky really just had parents who, embarrassed him, put him in really embarrassing attire, or dyed his fur pink because they really wanted a girl. And that's why he rebelled and became a stoner surfer, in his early 20s. Of course, they named him Funky, too, so it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, was it not? All right. So anyway, anything else? Oh, let me just read Cranky's blurb real quick, because this is still interesting and validating as a Donkey Kong fan. Okay. Cranky Kong. Also known as Donkey Kong Sr., Cranky's days of kidnapping Pauline and terrorizing Mario and Stanley the Bugman have long since passed. Now he dispenses snarky tips, breaks the fourth wall, and otherwise lives up to his new name. Cranky served as an opportunity for the developers to satirize certain video game tropes, such as the notes section included in the instruction booklet that Cranky doubts anyone actually uses. It's a solid write-up of Cranky Kong.
Yeah, that is exactly Cranky Kong.
You don't really see Cranky Kong contextualized in such a perfect way in the modern era anymore. Like, I love Cranky in Retro's games, and he is at least cranky a little bit in Donkey Kong Country Returns, but you don't really get him being such a snarky bitch anymore, and especially somebody who really does like mock the game. Cranky Kong never mocked Donkey Kong Country Returns, and especially not in Tropical Freeze, although he's probably biased because he was actually playable in Tropical Freeze. So
yeah, I want to see him start like making jokes about like all the other hardware generations that have passed.
Cranky in Tropical Freeze should have been complaining that it should have been a Metroid game. Retro had a golden opportunity there, and I really wish somebody would have taken it. Oh well. A little bit hard because he didn't really have dialogue in that game, I understand, but there should have been a should have been Metroid game joke in there. Should have been Metroid. So
yeah, Cranky's a really big fan of Samus, and he thinks he is awesome.
Yeah,
because because Cranky's only played one Metroid game and he never finished it.
Yeah,
and he's horribly sexist.
I'm sure Cranky Kong is horribly misogynistic. I wonder how Cranky Kong would feel about the new Wolfenstein game. Maybe I'll just move on. Donkey Kong Isle is on page 194, and this is basically mini layouts for selected levels with the layouts provided by apparently DKC Atlas, which is awesome. And they are thanked in the back. So I'm glad DKC Atlas gets their due, because DKC Atlas has always approached their content from a different viewpoint than we have. And so I've always been a fan of DKC Atlas because they're interested in things we have no interest in. And so it's nice that fans have that resource.
And their level maps are gorgeous, yeah. And you can very much tell that these are theirs. Like, I think they've even left in, like, DKC Atlas's distinctive notation for, like, automatic blast barrels. Yeah.
So, as the lead-in to this section, they quote Greg Mayles very briefly. It says that Greg Mayles has openly referred to the backgrounds in Donkey Kong Country as the bane of the project. So now I'm just picturing Greg Mayles getting his back broken over Tom Hardy's knee. So basically what they go into here is that the team wanted the game to feel organic and to not have repeating single screen patterns in the background, as was the norm of 2D platformers. So what they did was they spliced background elements together to retain the 3D model quality of the game while also disguising the repeating elements. And, it's something that they did very, very well, considering I never noticed until Retro's Donkey Kong Country games. So
yeah, there's not a very obvious stitch together part of the backgrounds in the DKC games where it starts to repeat. I think each background is about a screen wide, so you never see the obvious repeat in a single screen.
Right. And like I said, when Donkey Kong Country Returns came out, and each part of the background was unique and different, and that's when I realized, oh my God, I've been living a lie. The Donkey Kong Country games for the Super Nintendo, it's just all the same, the same designs in the Flintstones-esque repeating backgrounds.
You got Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, there we go. So the levels that they do give maps for are Jungle Hijinks, Minecart Carnage, Treetop Town, Snow Barrel Blast, Blackout Basement, Tanked Up Trouble, and they do have a page for the Gangplank Galleon. And I think those are all very, very smart selections. They're all iconic stages, all good representations of each world. Instead of Blackout Basement, I would have maybe gone with Frantic Factory, but
agreed. But I think for the most part they picked either the standout level from each world or one that very well sums it up,
or the ones that people remember. I think
in the case of Tanked Up Trouble, it might be the one they really, really hated.
Yeah. And it's worth pointing out, too, that both Indiana Jones and the Forest Moon of Endor get name-dropped in the Minecart Carnage and Treetop Town descriptions, respectively. So, considering that's something Donkey Kong fans always like to point out, the Temple of Doom and Return of the Jedi homages and inspiration for those stages, it's nice to see that in print in a book that carries the Nintendo seal. So now let's go to the 16 bits section. So these are 16 facts about Donkey Kong Country and the overall legacy of the series. So let's go through all 16. Why not? We won't necessarily read them all verbatim, but I think we can hit all of them without kind of ruining the book, right? So, number one, they show off the Super Famicom box art for Donkey Kong Country, which I've always loved that rendered scene. It has all the animal buddies, sans Winky and Engard in it. I love that Squawks is in it, and I love Espresso's facial expression.
This is the same render they use in the Japanese version on the title screen. They put the Super Nintendo in a special high color mode to use it.
I prefer this, honestly. As much as I said, I'll take whatever they want me to get in my region. I would have preferred this because I think it's one of the best rendered scenes Rare did for the original Donkey Kong Country.
It does, at the very least, one of my favorite things that's typical of Rare box arts in the mid-90s, which is just throw a shit ton of characters who are in the game all in one image.
Exactly.
In context, that's important. This isn't just contextless renders put in a collage. This is a rendered scene of them interacting.
Yeah, and obviously it's kind of silly because the slip is sneaking right up. It's going to bite Donkey Kong on the ankle, but he doesn't seem to care. What I like about
this is about to be a stampede that's just going to end horribly.
Yeah. What I like about these scenes, though, is they also kind of give you a taste of the world you're going to experience. I like Donkey Kong Country's box art on outside of Japan, but that and this and Donkey Kong Land, DKC 2, you get a sense of the world you're about to live for the better part of 10 to 40 hours, depending on how much you're going to play.
At the very least, if you haven't checked out the boxes other regions got for these games, do yourself a favor and do it, because at the very least, it's just neat to see radically different artwork for these games. I mean, my personal favorite, like, I think, render of all time to this day is the Japanese Japanese Diddy Kong Racing box art, because it manages to squeeze Diddy Kong, Conker, Banjo, and the entire rest of the cast, except maybe Drumstick, plus Whizpig, all in a single scene.
Yeah, and I wish that was the Diddy Kong Racing box art we got over here. Why don't we alternate these? Cameron, you can do number 2.
Regional differences. Okay, this goes into a little bit of... This is fitting because it's playing right off of the last one. The differences between the various versions of the game, specifically alterations that were made to the Japanese version to make it a bit less difficult. I know we won't go over all of these, but I know the biggest one for me was in the Japanese version, you can kill rock crocs with the hand slap move.
This is surprising to me. You know, obviously I knew this, I heard this, but I always forget it until I'm reminded about it, because you wouldn't think they would make the game easier for Japanese audiences, because usually, especially, you know, 80s through the 90s, it was always kind of contextualized for me that Nintendo saw American and Canadian gamers.
Well, that was the whole point of Super Mario Brothers 2.
Right. They saw us as wimps and basically Philistines who could not play a hard game. So it's
rather they probably got complaints in Japan that it was hard first.
Perhaps, yeah. But I always think, people in Japan, they were the hardcore gamers. We couldn't handle it. And here they are making Donkey Kong Country easier for Japan. It's still surprising me every time I hear it.
I've got to say, though, I picked up a Japanese cartridge of Donkey Kong Country and played through it a little bit, and when you get to Stop and Go Station, it is so satisfying to knock those fuckers off the screen.
Couldn't you do that in one of the remakes, either Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance?
I don't know if you could in Game Boy Color. I think you could in Game Boy Advance.
Okay, because I remember that being a revelation when I could finally fuck those fuckers up a little bit. Number 3, Kremlin Crew. Wow, they actually referred to them as the Kremlin Crew. So remember what I said when they said, whoever wrote the Donkey Kong Country section went to Donkey Kong sources for all their stuff. Well, here we go, Kremlin Crew, which we got from, I believe, the Super Smash Bros. Melee trophy descriptions. That's where the term Kremlin Crew came from. But we've tried to keep it alive, and it does.
It's alliterative. It fits the series really well.
Yeah, and here we go. It's in an official Nintendo book, Kremlin Crew. So it basically they allude to the fact that the Kremlins were originally designed for a potential Battletoads sequel without outright saying it. So, yeah. Number 4, Cameron?
Claptrap and Zinger variants. Oh, this is about the... DKC has a lot of palette-swapped enemies, probably more than... this is a trend series-wide, but DKC 1 has by far the most of them. And this goes into some of the ones they still... are in the game code, but they did not use. And points out that they did end up using some of these in the Game Boy Advance version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which, it's funny. I look at these and I'm just like, I barely register a difference. It's like the zingers are just so minusculely shaded differently that I honestly couldn't remember if they were in the game or not.
What I most distinctly remember about this in the game itself is I noticed there were tons of different colored zingers and claptraps, but until decades later on the internet, I had no idea what the colors were supposed to mean, if anything. I thought it was just multicolor wildlife.
Yeah, like Crusha, the difference between the stronger ones and the weaker ones, because there's only 2, so it's a starker difference. But and
you're going to remember an enemy you can't defeat with anything but a barrel.
Exactly. Number 5, Boxy Beginnings. Ooh, this is getting sexy. And basically, it's talking about that computer-generated boxer that Rare showed off to help snag the Donkey Kong deal, as it says here in the book. And then it says that that's potentially what led to they actually reference Killer Instinct here. They don't call him by name, but they talk about TJ Combo in Killer Instinct.
A champion boxer in Killer Instinct, which, is TJ Combo.
Which I read this, when the book came out, and I didn't really register that, they can't talk about Killer Instinct, can they? Because that's owned by Microsoft. But you get a little tip of the hat to Killer Instinct. It's there in italics. And then there's also a picture of Donkey Kong from off of Punch-Out for the Wii. And it says Donkey Kong himself later appeared as a secret opponent in Punch-Out.
And this is the section where they get free reign to put in artwork from other games where it makes sense.
Yes, we can't complain about it here. All right.
Oh, is it my turn?
It's your turn.
Silicon Furnace Incorporated. Oh, this is a tidbit you see in a lot of anecdotes from people who were actually on the DKC team. It's about the heat radiating from the machines that were rendering Donkey Kong Country and how it made the DKC barn into a sweat box.
That sounds miserable. As somebody who hates having to be productive when I'm miserably hot and sweaty, that sounds like a nightmare to me.
Yeah, I had a computer studio back at my college that had a one low-powered AC window unit, and I remember just not being able to get a thing done because in that kind of heat, just technology sticks to you, and it's awful. And new level of appreciation every time that tidbit comes up for the original team.
At least they set the game on a tropical island, so they could immerse themselves in the lifestyle.
And they didn't make Lemonade World or as drop maybe Gorilla Glacier was just trying to give the higher ups a hint to bring in more AC units.
Right. Oh, good. I get number 7. DKC TV. A CG animated Donkey Kong Country television show aired its 40 episodes in the U.S. from 1997 to 2000. Notable changes from the games include renaming DK Isle to Congo Bongo Island and a complete revamp of the Candy Kong character. She was the shrew she was the killjoy. She was the very very stereotypical female character that is problematic. I think looking back on it now, and look, I am certainly guilty of it. I remember writing Elvis Like Money. That's how I wrote our lead woman, our only woman regular on the show. That's how I wrote her. She was essentially Candy Kong from the Donkey Kong Country cartoon show. And you think at the time, oh, well, all the male characters are idiots. So if I write the lady as above it all, then that's feminism. But you don't realize then you're going to make people just hate that character. Who they want to have a good time with the idiots. And I understand that as a writer now, and I would go back and do that completely differently. So anyway.
This next
insight into the writing process.
This next section, Smash and Kart. This is just a blanket declaration that DK and Diddy have been in Smash Brothers and Mario Kart. Yeah,
it doesn't really go into the fact that they were subjugated as Mario characters and lost their brand identity as a result, which, by the way, if you want more on that subject, check out the Geek Critique's new video on Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, because it actually goes into that with an awesome analogy in that, okay, imagine a different world where Link is the one who got shoved into Mario Kart and got no core games in his series, and imagine how people would view Link and Zelda in 2017 if that were the case. So very well done, and I want to live in that world where Donkey Kong retained its brand identity and Zelda was torpedoed.
At the very least, please do check out Josh Wallen's series, The Geek Critique. It's amazing.
Yes, friend of the show.
Just gonna plug that every chance I get.
I get to do number 9. Pre-DKC. Before it became Donkey Kong Country, Rare had conceptualized a few different takes on the Donkey Kong property. So what this is talking about is what Greg Mails showed off on Twitter over the last couple of years, where all of these like conceptual books they came up with to pitch to Nintendo. One of them was Donkey Kong and the Golden Bananas, and one of them was Donkey Kong versus Super Wario. So that's cool to see that they were cribbing from Greg Mail's Twitter.
You know, if there's any... This is one of those scenarios where that pitch sounds much more appealing now than it would have been back in the day. I would love to see that game made today. Now that
Donkey Kong versus Super Wario?
Yeah, now that Donkey Kong has this established world that Wario can just go in and rip to shreds.
Well, it also doesn't hurt that Wario is my favorite Mario character, and he's the only Mario character I have up on my action figure shelf on my desk with all the other DKU characters. I was like, yeah, I got to get Wario in there. Yeah. He's part of the gang.
Nintendo is really adept at lovable pricks.
Hey, we've already discussed number 10, but you can touch upon it real quick.
The treehouse. Yeah, this is just talking about what the treehouse is and why it has that name.
Right. Yeah. Number 11, brand name Bananas. The giant bananas, apparently, that had the Nintendo sticker on them, originally had a actual banana brand logo before they were replaced.
It isn't named here, but do you remember what that brand was? I feel like it came out before.
Was it either Chiquita or Dole? Those are the only ones I can think of.
Yeah, I want to say it was Chiquita, but that may be because they did an actual Chiquita promotion years later.
I can't imagine Rare actually expected to get away with that. That was probably just a placeholder.
Probably, and I know like the part of my brain wants to say that it wasn't Dole because Dole did do an endorsement deal years later with Super Monkey Ball.
Right, and besides, Dole was getting ready to run for president in '94, so Bob Dole didn't appreciate that hackneyed joke. Bob Dole. I'm old. Continue.
Jungle Japes, the first level was apparently originally named Jungle Japes, but they changed it to the oddly spelled Jungle Hijinks later.
Actually, there's a typo here. They typed Jungle Hijinks incorrectly.
A typo in that it's spelled correctly.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is probably something like autocorrect caught.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when you try to type fuck in a text message and it wants to autocorrect it because surely you don't have such salty language. I'm actually going back now and seeing they spelled Jungle Hijinks correctly in the little mini walkthrough, and by correctly I mean they spelled it incorrectly, but correctly as far as the context of the game goes. They spelled it XS.
This is such a hard
there.
Series to talk about.
I know, right? No wonder nobody likes it but us. All right. 13 is Identity Crisis. Oh, God. Watch out, Sue Dibney. Sorry. King K. Rool was originally named Crud, and we knew that from the concept art, again, from Twitter.
Rather badass concept art.
Yeah, that was one scary K. Rool. Like, I love the goofier, more hapless K. Rool. Obviously, that's the version I prefer, but man, that was a frightening, kind of nightmarish take on the character.
I love what we got. I don't dislike what we saw.
Exactly.
14, Cranky. And, this is going into some of the unused quotes from Cranky Kong, which you can find, I believe, on both the cutting room floor and DKC Atlas.
Yes.
Some of the ones implying that Cranky had like a few nicer phrasings.
Right, yeah. Like, it's about time you visited your frail, old grandpa. And
That just seems passive-aggressive. I don't know if that's nice.
Okay, then there's, hey, can you spare your old pappy a banana? Which makes it sound like he's starving and dependent upon DK for food. And then there's Diddy Boy, where's donks? You know, on Twitter, I asked people recently, how do you refer to Donkey Kong normally? Do you always refer to him as the full title, Donkey Kong? Do you do what I do, and apparently nobody else does, and call him Donkey? Do you use the preferred shorthand DK? I did not ask if people called him Dunks, and maybe I want to get Dunks started. Let's
I also
Dunks.
noticed that nobody seems to call him what the original design documents called him like all the time, which was
What's
just
that?
Kong.
Kong, yeah. Which
Probably understandably, because in any other context, people are going to think you're talking about King Kong.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that in the original design docs, that's before they originally really built up Donkey Kong's world and had all of these other Kongs. So I can see, like, when... Okay, if all you have to go off of is the arcade games and various ancillary appearances since then, you would refer to Donkey Kong before you even like have any crazy ideas like we're going to age up the characters, make the original Donkey Kong Cranky Kong. You would just think of Donkey Kong as Kong, the Kong, as far as Nintendo is concerned. So that doesn't really weird me out so much, but yeah, it just seems wrong Kong in light of all of the cast we've come to know and love who also have the same clan surname. So, I guess this is my turn, isn't it? 15, Squawks. And it just talks about how originally Donkey Kong wore a miner's helmet with the flashlight attached. And like Mario Party 2, he was going to have a fancy hat in specific stages. And in the final game, they just decided to use Squawks the parrot instead.
I am really, really happy they made this change.
Yeah.
I think in addition to just Squawks being an awesome character and they were able to personify a gameplay mechanic that way, I just think about like Donkey Kong's sprite overlaid with a mining helmet, and it just doesn't jive quite right.
It's what I loved and still do love about Rare's design philosophies, in that when in doubt, they would just bring in another character. And another character you would love and cherish for the rest of your days. And I love Squawks way more than I would love some hat Donkey Kong wore. So, yeah.
Though in this
agreed.
alternate reality, does that, like, hat end up carrying Diddy and Dixie in the next game?
Yeah, it would be the prototype for Cappy in Super Mario Odyssey. This would be the original multi-use hat. By the way, they also provide that tropical freeze render of Squawks you referred to, with him on a branch.
And, our last tidbit here, DK Jams.
With the Z.
That's why I said jams.
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 It makes me wish that, like, because right now Pepsi-Cola has like Crystal Pepsi out for a limited time again, and in the grocery store, in my local Kroger, they have a whole display of them, like a cardboard corrugated dump of Crystal Pepsi bottles, and it says "Last chance to taste the '90s." And it really makes me wish that Smuckers would come out with a 90s themed, I don't know, product called Smuckers Jams with a C. All right. Next page. And this is just talking about speed running with a DKC speedrunner, and I'm not familiar with the speedrunning community, so unfortunately am not even sure how to pronounce this guy's moniker. Eazin?
Eazinn.
Yeah.
And for how many times I've watched AGDQ, I'm feeling very guilty right now.
Well, he apparently holds multiple world records in Donkey Kong Country speedrunning. So he gives some tips on how to, rush through the game, I guess. I say that very dismissively. I'm not a speedrunner, so I don't mean to besmirch by when I say rush through the game. It's just going to sound nasty coming from me because I'm somebody who loves spending hours in each stage.
I will call attention to one specific pull quote here, which I really like. To sum up Donkey Kong Country speedrunning, any time not spent rolling is generally time better spent rolling.
Okay.
Which I like that, like, when you project that from a lore standpoint, like Donkey Kong is just constantly somersaulting his way all the way to the Gangplank Galleon.
Well, that also sounds like it could be a quote from some sort of, like, stereotypical, like, Asian master Kong, like Kongfucius or something. Had any been put in the game? I think Kongfucius was actually a character in the DKC.
You know, I think Funky Kong also says this a lot, but the context is different.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that sounds like some sort of. That sounds like some sort of like fortune cookie kind of like wisdom that you would get. All right, this is an awesome 2-page spread that ends the DKC section, and this is Legacy, the legacy of Donkey Kong Country. And I believe most games in this book have a similar section, but this goes over all of the games that kind of spawned out of Donkey Kong Country. And, obviously you're listening to the Kongversation. You might be a regular at DK Vine, so we don't need to spell out for you what these games are, but it's worth noting what was included and what was excluded. Real quick, all the Country sequels and the Land series were included, although they don't get their own entries. Country 2 and Country 3 have kind of share some space.
And it's just nice that this section is in the book for each game in general, just because it's acknowledging these games don't exist in a bubble just because they're the only ones on the SNES Classic.
Exactly. Donkey Kong 64 is in there. The Donkey Konga series is referenced, although they don't really get into each one. Jungle Beat's in there. Barrel Blast is in there. Country Returns is in there. Tropical Freeze is in there. Another game's in there that I'm going to circle back to, Cameron. But it's worth pointing out that both King of Swing and Jungle Climber do not get any due.
And yet Barrel Blast does.
And yeah. So... also, there's no Mario versus Donkey Kong, which I'm kind of glad because those are Mario games. I know.
It should also be noted this
disagree, but
this doesn't go. This legacy section only goes over games that happened after Donkey Kong Country, so none of the arcade titles are in this either.
Right. Well, and this is very much Rare's Donkey Kong, the legacy of Rare's Donkey Kong. So I'm fine with it. There's also no Donkey Kong Country Barrel Maze, unfortunately, which would have kind of not just blown my mind, but would have melted my face off like a Nazi at the Ark of the Covenant had they included Barrel Maze in here. So probably for the best they didn't. But they also included Diddy Kong Racing, Cameron, which I honestly did not expect, considering the complicated legal nature of Diddy Kong Racing.
And they name drop both Banjo and Conker.
Yeah, this is worth reading verbatim. Diddy Kong Racing marked the first appearance of Rare's Banjo and Conker characters, both of whom would go on to star in their own games for the Nintendo 64. So, holy shit, like, that's pretty big. Like, these characters that are outright owned by Microsoft have sequels and various iterative spin-offs for Xbox are referenced here in the legacy section for Donkey Kong Country. So that's a nice feather in our miner's helmet. Nice flashlight in our miner's helmet. That's a better. Let's pretend like you didn't hear. I didn't start with feather. No, it was Squawks' feather in the mining helmet. There we go. So they also reference Donkey Kong Racing at the bottom here. They talk about a version of Diddy Kong Racing was released for the Nintendo DS in 2007.
A version, not a sequel.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But they didn't outright dismiss that it could be canonically separate, so we're in the clear there. A sequel, Donkey Kong Racing, was in development for the Nintendo GameCube, but was ultimately canceled. Nothing about Kevin Callahan's blog, though. So, hopes are dashed yet again.
He's not in the special thanks either.
No. On the last bottom half of the last page here, page 207, they list the Donkey Kong Country credits with a K as they appeared in the actual game themselves. So, in very much rare style, only the first letter of each first name is included.
Which, as we later learned, was apparently because people would read these lists of credits and poach talent from companies.
That's one reason they were so secretive about who each person was. Yeah, it's it's why we didn't know, like, I didn't know Gmail's was Greg, as in the Grim Reaper from Conker's Bad Fur Day, until later on. But yeah, it's nice to see, Chris Sutherland is in there, obviously Greg Mails is in there. You got, it's the same as the credits in DKC. Steve Mails, of course, Kev Bayless, and then Wise, Fisher, and Beanland all, get a credit. So, that is the Donkey Kong Country section in Playing with Super Power. Now, Cameron, we've both read through a little bit more of this book, and even though this is a Donkey Kong podcast, or at least a Donkey Kong Universe /Rare/Playtonic podcast, was there anything else interesting in this book besides that blurb in Super Mario Kart that set people's hair on fire that you find worthy of talking about before we wrap this up?
Yeah, there was quite a bit in this book, and I just want to bring up again, that's we did not just spend the last hour or so covering the good parts, so now you don't have to buy it. No, you still have to buy this.
Exactly. Yes, you have to. Even though we don't have a financial stake in it, we're requiring you. If you're going to be part of the DK Vine community, you have to purchase this.
There's just some weird trivia that I'm sure is out there on the internet, but I would have never gone to venture forth and find on my own. One of them was in an earlier section of the book. They pull up some design documents from when they were figuring out what the Super Nintendo was going to look like in the West, and I thought a funny bit of trivia they mentioned was they purposely designed the cart slot on the Super Nintendo so that it would be curved. The rest of the system is pretty boxy, but that is distinctively a curve.
Yeah, and
the reason is because one of the most frequent repair problems that would need to necessitate a repair for the Nintendo Entertainment System was people would set drinks on top of the flat top of the NES, knock them over, spill them inside, and let the sticky liquid substances all drain into the system.
lads. Yeah,
so they deliberately designed it with a curve so people wouldn't try to do that.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, the design of the NES was very much kind of inspired by VCRs of the era, which was a big thing, and they wanted it to be kind of this piece of hardware that would be right at home in a home entertainment center, setup. But Yeah,
Yeah, and
you don't want to go too flat.
I've had a Super Nintendo since I was 6, and it still works. Therefore, they have made these especially idiot-proof.
There was an interesting part I saw about there was concern about the cartridge being top loading because of the way people's home entertainment systems would be set up. Like they would have their Super Nintendos in like cabinets with not very high shelving, and people wouldn't be able to get their games in without like pulling it out. And so they actually toyed with a front loading system, a horizontal loading system for the cartridges a la the NES, but they ultimately didn't go forward with it. So I thought that was interesting. And you mentioned the Star Fox section earlier. So they're considering, 3 Star Fox games are relevant to DK Vine. Any interesting things you want to bring up there?
Yeah, I was just, again, as I mentioned, in regards to the Legacy section in the DKC section, the Star Fox section also doesn't shy away from mentioning all of the games that came after it, including the ones we cover on the site, Star Fox Adventures, Star Fox Assault, and Star Fox Command.
Yeah.
And they do bring up things like there's a render of Crystal from Command in there. It makes note of the fact that from Assault onward, she took Peppy's spot on the team. Something I was really surprised to see in the 16-bit section for Star Fox, which I'm not going to read all those to you, but
God, no.
They mentioned the Japanese exclusive manga that was made to coincide with Star Fox Adventures, Farewell Beloved Falco, which was a story, a print story that took place in between Star Fox 64 and Star Fox Adventures that explains Falco's absence from the team in Star Fox Adventures.
Right.
And
I know a lot of people like view that as canon. Like that's one of the few outside sources that a lot of fans
I definitely do. It's just a really satisfying canon welding story. And I'm kind of glad to see it pop up here.
So in the back of the book, starting on page 282, there is a section called Superfans. And this is kind of a collective of people who were inspired by games for the Super Nintendo, but specifically games that are featured in the SNES Classic. And so this is a motley crew of different fan artists, websites, and even things like Video Games Live is in here.
Yeah, they run the gamut on this one. There's this is not just fan sites and fan art strictly in the pretty illustrations sense, and don't get me wrong, there are plenty of those. But you also get cosplayers, you get sort of more craft-oriented arts, photo manipulations, and it's just kind of a nice variety.
Yeah, there's some I'm already familiar with, like the guy who makes the shadow boxes. I've seen and even spotlighted his stuff on the DK Vine Facebook page in the past. And so it was cool. I was like, oh yeah, hey, that's cool. So I hope that a lot of people in this book who thumbed through it to see if they were in there.
I'm sure you probably picked up on this one too. One that I noticed was the Jungle Lineage image, which was before Returns was announced, was the picture people in our community would find on DeviantArt and share around and say, holy shit, this is what we want Donkey Kong to look like.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't see that image until the Sunday night when the rumors that Retro was going to make a Donkey Kong Country game, the Sunday before the Tuesday where, Reggie came out on stage and said, you can hear it coming. That the Sunday where so many people came back to DK Vine, and that was really the spark that reignited everything starting this decade. And so I was like just enthralled by the possibility that we would get a new Donkey Kong Country game, and that's when I saw that image, because I just started doing a Google image search, and I was like, oh my god, what if it looked like this? And obviously it didn't, but I have a lot of warm and fuzzy feelings for that particular piece of fan art. As far as the fan sites in here go, it's ones you would expect. Obviously, Starman is in here.
It would be a crime not to have them in here,
right? And you get ones like Metroid Database. Some of these I'm not familiar with. Shamefully, I have to say. F-Zero Central. And,
I'm glad this book introduced me to that one, because I just didn't expect a dedicated F-Zero fan site to still be active, and now I really want to look into it.
Right. Star Fox Online is the Star Fox representative here. And there's
Zelda Universe.
Right.
Mention that one.
Yeah. This is really thrilling podcasting, by the way, hearing us flip through pages of a book. And then, of course, on page 314, Cameron, is DK Vine, representing good old Donkey Kong Country. And apparently Bottles, Danny DeVito, a Sea of Thieves pirate, the DKC2 GBA Ostrich Mbazzy, and, of course, Kiddy Kong in a toilet. So...
Yeah, I just want to say... These...
How did legal clear Danny DeVito? Did they have to call up Danny DeVito's agent and be like, "Hey, Mr. DeVito, can you you're compared to a ground burrowing rodent in this Nintendo book. You cool with that?"
It's not even like you don't have the plausible deniability of that could be any short balding man. It's explicitly has written out Bottles, Danny DeVito, separated at birth.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, there are two different screenshots of DK Vine in this book. One from the year 2000 that showcases the original site design, and one that's current, which is actually our DKC3 anniversary skin that's on its way out, with the DK Vine ukulele tribute logo that's still up.
Yeah, if you look at the screenshot, it was taken during E3, so you get this kind of really, really serendipitous microcosm of signature DK Vine things.
It was actually after E3, because it was Joe's article, right after E3, Joe's article about the SNES Classic Edition being announced,
which
is the news article.
Which very fortunately was not a snippy article.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the news article. The character of the week is Mbazzy. The Kongversation thumbnail has a pirate from Sea of Thieves. The ad is Kiddy Kong Go.
Yeah.
And just, again, the logo is ukulele, the background is DKC3. This was a nice little... everything that could have turned out for the best kind of did, to get just the right amount of things that define exactly the stuff DK Vine is super into, along with some of the obscura that will confound everyone who's not familiar with the site.
Right. I just love that so much of what DK Vine is, and especially the Donkey Kong spin-off stuff, like Bottles. It's in the Super Nintendo book. That's just so mind-blowing.
I will say, one unfortunate bit is that part of the wood frame around the site, the image assets hadn't completely loaded when they took the screenshot.
Oh, yeah.
So those are missing, but I'm willing to forgive it because they've sort of laid this out in a nice... I'm guessing they probably composited this together because it's an image that shows together, our current site layout has a dynamic perspective where you start at the top of the shoreline and slowly scroll down until you reach the bottom of the ocean. They've composited this together so all of those elements are in one image.
I'm disappointed by that. They should have gone with a lenticular page that changes the perspective when you turn it back and forth.
Yeah, so I kind of sort of see all of every 3 layouts instead of all of one.
So I don't mean to like brag or this isn't bragging, but this is kind of just utter amazement. We get the most space out of any fan site in this book, and I mean it's marginal, but we get essentially almost 2 whole pages. We share our last page with a cosplayer, but
yeah, it was convenient in the page layout that you like some of the other sites I noticed like have a page and then you have to turn it to read the rest of their section. DK Vines kind of lucks out in that we get like a 1.5 page spread.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit too close to this for comfort. I'm like the classic 1980s sitcom, too close for comfort. So would you like mind hitting some of the points in this? I guess quasi interview with me.
Yeah, do you want me to just sort of go through this and pick up some little cliff notes of everything mentioned?
Yeah. Like what are some weird, interesting things that are in here that I don't want to give away. I don't want to give away the cow, or I don't want to give away the milk without the cow. Here.
I'll just give away some select highlights in a general sense.
Highlights, if you will.
Yeah, you've mentioned that you launched the site with Chad as a teenager. You mentioned like the lasting appeal of Donkey Kong Country was in its world and characters and making everything sort of relatable and feel like a world, and that really got it like a sizable portion of this. So it's really nice to see that in black and white in a Nintendo book.
Yeah,
and it should be written like this isn't just you going on a spiel for a page and a half. They've structured this interview, and I noticed this when I first read it. This didn't seem like the writers had an idea of how they wanted to frame this in mind, and then used whatever pull quotes were relevant for you. They had a basic framework to ask you questions, of course, but like they do just let you talk for a while at a time and sort of they let you set the tone of the piece.
And as any regular listener of the Kongversation knows, I love the talk. Be glad this didn't go over 40 pages.
And like I'll just mention some of my favorite things. You give a plug to DK Girder.
Yeah, I don't even remember doing that. I think I Am Gibbon must have like sneaked into the offices and put that in there without me knowing, because I have no recollection.
It was a mention of people who, like, what DK Vine's influences were and people they've influenced in turn. And DK Gibbon, sorry, that was a horrible mangling of that. DK Girder comes up. There's a small allusion to DK Vine helping lead to a relationship.
Yes. Yeah. Well, obviously, they're talking about you and I, Cameron. I mean,
should we name specifics on that? Is that an invasion of privacy?
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe. I didn't get any written agreement for that one.
Yeah.
So,
but the couple in question reached out and thought it was very sweet. So.
Oh, cool. They didn't tell me that. Okay.
Like-minded weirdos gets in.
Yeah. If I could point out my favorite thing, my admiration for Diddy Kong gets way too much space. And again, I didn't realize this was going to be for an official Nintendo publication, so I probably wouldn't have pointed out that I admire Diddy Kong, but that had no basis on him not wearing pants.
And you mentioned like what a highlight it was to see DKC Returns announced and how that was sort of the quintessential moment in the site's history. You mentioned correspondence with Rare and Retro, and I guess I'll leave the rest to everybody's imagination, but
I hang dong. I whip it out at the end. Finally get to see it in all of its glory. And I would like to also point out something else that I think a lot of people have missed, which I thought was really sweet. So on page 282 at the beginning of the super fan section, when they kind of set this whole thing up, DK Vine gets a small little allusion in the one paragraph here, which I will read this verbatim. So then there were the worlds beyond the television, the ones forged by fans themselves, who found friendship at local game stores, through message boards, and on fan sites. It may seem odd that strangers from all walks of life were brought together by a mutual admiration for a tie-wearing gorilla, but the context makes those connections no less real.
oh,
Which I thought was sweet, yeah. So, playing with superpower, Nintendo Super Nintendo Entertainment System Classics. Yeah. Final thoughts, Cameron, on this. Obviously, we just kind of scratched the surface. There is just so much in here, and you don't have to just be a fan of Donkey Kong Country to really dig this book. Like, I was thumbing through the F-Zero section earlier today and just kind of getting engrossed with it. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of those days when I would get like a Nintendo Power in the mail and I would read that thing front to back and just kind of absorbing everything, even stuff I wasn't necessarily invested in or even planned to buy. I would still read it, and I found it fascinating. And this book takes me back to that era and these specific games from my youth, and it's delightful. It is a love letter to all of these games, to the Super Nintendo in general, and to a specific era, the Play It Loud era of Nintendo.
yeah, it's like a weird sort of time machine mix of feeling like thumbing through like an old Nintendo Power back issue database, and with the added hindsight of the modern era to just sort of carry some of these informational tidbits through, and it's a really, really nice read. Like, there's sections in here from games I haven't played, and now, damn it, I want a Super Nintendo Classic to play them.
Yeah, good luck with it. Luckily, this book is much easier to find than a Super NES Classic.
Yeah.
I know it's at Barnes & Noble. I think people have spotted it at Best Buy.
That was definitely one of the surreal bits for me, was after we found out like DK Vine was in the book, just like this thing that you're still kind of not over the fact that this is a thing. I walked into a Best Buy over the weekend for some other purpose, and just no SNES Classics, but that's sitting there shelved is the hardcover. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, DK Vine's in that.
Yeah. It's kind of cool to like walk into a store and know that goddamn Photoshop of Bottles and Danny DeVito side by side is in this book that's just sitting on there on the shelf in this store with all these other things. It's obviously very validating. Somebody who's been doing this for more than 18 years. But
which they also have printed in the book. And wow, 18 years has a lot more weight to when it's on a 100-pound piece of paper.
Yeah, so anyway, it's at Barnes & Noble, Best Buy. I'm sure other stores carry it. And, of course, you can always get it via Amazon and other online retailers. And again, we don't get any monetary cut of this. It's just something cool we got to take part in. And I want to thank Prima Games. I want to thank Megan Marie and Sebastian Haley for extending this opportunity to talk with them. And obviously, I want to thank Nintendo for not cutting us from the book. I want to thank Reggie for letting me buy him his Secret Santa gift. I have something earmarked for you, Reggie. I hope you like it. I don't know your measurements, but I've fantasized about them quite a bit, and I see the size of your genitalia when I sleep at night, so I pretty much know exactly the cut of European briefs to purchase for you. I think you're going to enjoy them, and I just realized we are not going to be included in the Nintendo 64 edition of this series. Oh well, it was nice while it lasted.
You're not gonna get in, they'll just tell you to get out.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.